I love that song, and thank you for doing such a beautiful job of it. And I love it because it reminds us, as I embarked this morning to talk a bit about self-care and spiritual practice, that we are not just ours, that when we care for ourselves, we're caring for community too. So it is January, we are entering this new year. For some of us, a time of reframing or a time of resolution, a time of letting go, maybe taking up something closer to the life that we want to live, or helping the world to be something closer to the world we want to see. I got some good advice. A bird told me that if I was going to ask you to speak back to me at any point, I should warn you. So later on in the sermon, I'm going to ask if you want to share a spiritual practice, if you want to say that out loud. So if something springs to mind, I will invite you into that. But just in case you're somebody who likes to start thinking early. So I don't know if you've seen a list this season of the computer-generated resolutions. There is a woman named Janelle Shane who works with, as she calls them, algorithms which we call artificial intelligence. Her title this year is going to be Futurist in Residence at the Smithsonian. Pretty good title. And she uses computer modeling and feeds in internet text, food blogs, social media, and even spam as her data. And she asked the algorithms to suggest positive changes for the future. And some of them were very practical and poetic, like every time a bird flies past me, I will remember to breathe. Some of them were more whimsical. On the day of the first snow, I will paint a canvas red. And then there were some that defy category, such as act like a cabbage for a month, or jump in front of a moving tree. So yeah, if you want to see more of these really incredible computer-generated resolutions, I invite you to her blog, which is called AI Weirdness. So I do a silent meditation retreat when I can over New Year's. And so this year we were there in reduced numbers, everybody in masks in a big hall in central Massachusetts. And so yeah, I did a lot of thinking in those silent days about spiritual practice. And it struck me that it was sort of like giving the right amount of care to a plant. Like you don't want to overwater your succulent, and you don't want to put your basil out right in the direct sun without the water it needs. And I don't know, maybe you're not even a fan of the word spiritual, but I like it, and I think I like it because it's vague. I like it because it covers a lot of bases. And for me, I've been thinking about what is spirit, and I guess today, for me, I would say the spirit is the part of us which is curious, which offers goodwill, which knows truth when we hear it, the part of us that loves beauty even if it's painful. As a chaplain, I feel like that's part of why in times of illness or even death, we can experience those times as spiritual, because we might be having both great love and great grief together at once, and we're unwilling to let go of either one in that moment. So I'm curious about people's spiritual practices. Would anybody like to share anything that they consider a spiritual practice from your current life, or something that you are taking up or wanting to take up? Walking? Cleaning the house. Yes, indeed. It can be, and then it can be aspirational. It can be an aspirational spiritual practice for me sometimes. But yeah, it can be when we really sink into it. Others? Checking in on friends and loved ones, absolutely. Yeah, that cycle of care. Yeah. Doing Tai Chi. Oh, beautiful. Both physical and a mental practice, both at once. Yoga. Yeah. I feel like the first time that I truly experienced my body as a body was in yoga. Just that attention. Yeah. Any others? Prayer 5 times a day. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. Ooh, attention and silence at the same time. Yep. That can be really hard. Sometimes there's a lot resting in that silence, a lot of busy mind. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone else want to? Oh my gosh, that's lovely. My friend Christine does dishes as a meditative practice also. So Bob Shively, the former minister here. That's lovely. Yes, you're making things clean and setting them aside in a very orderly way, and you're serving people. I saw a little sticker on the fridge this morning that said, "Love people and feed them." I think, yeah, yeah. So I'm loving these. I feel like spiritual practice can be a simple and regular practice, which connects us to what's around us and what's inside of us. And maybe that's energy or people or senses or God. It could be productive, like cutting an apple, cleaning the house, baking a loaf of bread, making a bed, sweeping the floor, painting. But our focus is on noticing, enjoying, and care. I offered a workshop on everyday ritual once with a mom who was also a healthcare worker, and she mentioned the time before bed with her kids, where she was usually, everything was hectic. She was trying to wrangle them and get them ready for the next day, just trying to make sure everybody had what they needed, that nobody didn't brush their teeth and wake up with a stinky mouth. And she said, I just want to treat that time more intentionally each day. I want that day to be a special time together. So, it doesn't even have to be a change in what we do, but it can be a change in our orientation to the time that we already spend with each other. A spiritual practice, as we know, could also be purposefully non-productive. A mandala made of sand which blows away in the wind, or sitting, or singing, or chanting, or yoga. Just these practices of being with our body and our mind, simply. So spiritual practice can hold us on the days when things are simple, and they can also hold us on the days when things are harder. If we think about folks who may be drawn into fundamentalism, that can be because we don't feel our spiritual grounding is there when something hard happens. We don't know what's holding us, and we need to go looking for a structure right now. Sometimes people will say, and sometimes this will come up in a conversion type conversation, maybe you've heard it before, but some people will say that humans have a God-shaped hole in us sometimes. And for some people, maybe that is a God-shaped hole. But the longer I have lived with that feeling, the more I think it might just be the loneliness of living in a world as a thing with senses and a nervous system in a complicated world. Who needs to act? I need to act. But pleasure and pain are not the absolute indicators of what we must do in this world. Sometimes we must struggle for another person's freedom or for our own. Sometimes our own nourishment, our own food, comes at the expense of someone's pain or poor living conditions. It's no wonder that we experience this loneliness, fear, frustration, anger. Because we need meaning, we look for meaning. But that dream of living in harmony may seem really far away, or it may be really far away. And we can live covering up those feelings, drowning them, doing as much as we can to not look at them, smothering that part of us which yearns to draw a free breath. We may struggle with anxiety or fear, with pressure or addiction. Or we can allow those feelings some air. We'll return to Lao Tse. If there is to be peace between neighbors, there must be peace in the home. If there is to be peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart. One thing I've practiced on retreat, which you might love, is practicing walking upon the earth. And with each step, envisioning the earth supporting me with kindness, encouraging me. And I was thinking of inviting us to walk around the sanctuary. It's not very practical with all the things that we're living with right now, all of the structures that we need to keep us safe. But if you're at home, maybe you would like to do that, do a little practice. And if you're here in the sanctuary, maybe we can just picture ourselves taking steps or walking, because that's also very powerful. We can take a step and we can notice. We can be thankful for the earth holding us up. We can notice, how do our steps land? Do we land with determination or force or pushing? Is the earth just yielding to our steps, our need to get things done, need to go somewhere? Is the earth our springboard? Or can we be thankful in each step? Thank you, earth, for holding me up. There she is. And we're taking time in that moment to notice an important relationship between our feet and the earth. Thank you for going on that journey. This kind of walking or journeying, I believe, is part of what Thich Nhat Hanh means by interbeing. He said in 2019 in Plum Village, where he spent much time in his later years, that joy can be born from this kind of awareness. And I like that our steps, and just noticing our steps and noticing where we walk, and that we walk on something that supports us, that could bring us joy. Thich Nhat Hanh recommends 4 lines that he was taught when he was a young monk. The first being, waking up this morning, I smile. The second, I have 24 hours to live. The third, I vow to live them fully. And the fourth, to learn to look at people only with eyes of compassion and love. This is one thing, when we think of our sources in Unitarian Universalism, this is one thing that I get from Buddhism, the sense of practice, right? That every day is a new practice. And also the sense of gratitude for what is without having to change it. Now, if we move to another source from Christian spiritual practice, I think some of the Christian spiritual practices teach us not to be afraid of joy. If we think of singing and praise, ecstatic dance, praise dancing, raising our hands in worship, and I guess that's also a Sufi practice, the ecstatic dance. But these moments of over-the-top joy, togetherness, unity, even a kind of ecstasy. What would it be like to seek and to give in to ecstasy on a regular basis? And when I think of ecstasy, I think of a sense pleasure that we notice as pleasure. It's not just an escape, where we're sort of like, oh, I'm going to distract myself with this really intense thing so I don't have to think about this other thing. But a saying, and it's not either a saying no to something we don't want to experience, but a saying yes to this thing that's beautiful, that brings our body into tune. Maybe there is a meal that you love and you want to eat slowly and with pleasure. Maybe this is a practice of singing or dancing or exploring. But what brings you bliss? That is a good question. Also, within Christian spiritual practice, I find a thinking about what accompanies me. So, I have a dear friend who can spend about 90% of his time either working from anxiety, just working, because he feels like the dogs are at his heels, or reading or watching something so that he doesn't have to worry about the dogs that are at his heels. Right? So it's like the anxiety is that ever-present thing, and he's basically reacting to that anxiety in one way or another. And I can really relate to that. Right? But if that is the accompanying thing that follows us through each day, that's really good to know, just to notice. What do we want to be that thread that follows us? God or breath or work or family? What is the through line for us? What do we want it to be, and how do we touch in with it when it's important? I have a friend who is a kid whose parent is very sick. We've just found out. And Christianity gives us some automatic, something to hold on to for that. Like, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Right, and that might not be the thing that we go back to, but that sense of accompaniment, thinking about how we're going to accompany this kid. What is good for her to know? What is too much? Where will we see her sense of stability threatened? How can we build up extra support? This is going to be a spiritual practice, preparing a child and ourselves for this idea, brought right to our doorstep, that what we love, who we love, is a mortal person. So maybe for some of us, we would bring in a prayer practice to that, remembering our connectedness to that greater love. And that spirit of prayer, asking for what is needed, being humble, just opening ourselves up to answers, reaching out for a hand to hold. But maybe your practice would be setting up time with this person, knowing what you know, bringing this person breakfast every day, every week, so that you would have some sacred time with them. Another of our UU sources, humanism, I think also invites us into ethical practice. It's humanism itself asking, how does this affect what's living around us? How does this affect who's real? And I see the entire ecosystem as part of that, not just humans. And I think that humanism is present in the healthiest forms of so many faiths. But where humans are asking, oh my gosh, this is a really bad thing, how can I step in? What is mine to do? That ethical practice. So maybe that is an intentional spiritual practice for you, noticing in a situation, what is it that I'm called to here? And also remembering that doing is not necessarily the same as accompanying. Thich Nhat Hanh, which I love, this is within Buddhism and also within Hinduism. He often reminds us to follow our nature, which I love because within that, he's also making a claim about what our nature is, right? That our nature is worthy and good, that our nature is kind and shining, that our nature is connected and dependent and interdependent. And I really like this view because that means that our life project is basically brushing away things that get in the way of ourself shining and connecting. Uncovering our natural state, our natural care, and letting the things rest which pull us away from presence, from connection to our own core. And sometimes that's so hard when we're rushing, when things are pulling at us and asking for a total shift of gears, change of mindset all the time, overlapping, interrupting. But to remember in those moments that our core nature is enlightenment, thriving, peace, being affected by others and affecting others, care. I like that from the song, Liturgies of Care, right? We act out liturgies of care. Letting go of what dulls our natural shine. A while ago when I was in divinity school, I was actually going further than my parents had gone in terms of education. And I realized that all kinds of thoughts could come up in a new place. We want to tell a story around the events that happen to us, the things we find ourselves in for survival. We want to tell this story to keep ourselves sharp, to keep ourselves aware of danger. And with mindfulness, we can realize that the mind can create a persistent story or set of stories just to tether us, to give us comfort. Oh, I'm enough, I'm not enough. Oh, I'm definitely belong here, I don't belong here. Whatever those stories look like, whatever those dichotomies look like for you, if we're caught in that sense of striving or shame, feeling we're not good enough, a powerful kind of self-care can be letting be. Just letting the moment be what it is, right? Letting those stories rest. Just allowing some space without spinning. I belong, I don't belong, I'm enough, I'm not enough, I need to get better. Whatever your particular stories might sound like. It's so funny, I think, how the theme this month at church is reimagining the other, right? And it's so funny how sometimes the other is right inside of us, that we don't always recognize who we are, who's here, who this being is, what this body needs. When we're tired, or when the work that we've been dreading is actually very energizing and we like it. Another thing that we might think of as the other is some unattainable achievement or thing that we want to do, which is already really present within us as a seed. Right? We already contain the seeds of that thing. You already are that thing. Is that a message that you need this morning, that you already are? Because you are. You've already got it right there. If you're thinking about a new spiritual practice or enjoying one already, I just want to remind you that as you use, we don't have to do this on our own. Right? We can form a group, we can join an existing group. We're in the company of other seekers, which is a beautiful thing. I love that because I think it speaks to the word from our second reading, interbeing, which Thich Nhat Hanh created to describe our interconnected selves, our interdependence. Early in his life, Thich Nhat Hanh found balance after great grief, great sorrow, through walking his people across Vietnam, back to their homes after atrocities of war. Walking as a group, walking with purpose, walking with comrades, holding grief and pain and eventually hope. In the world at this time, we are in a narrow place, facing difficult choices. And we can meet that by narrowing ourselves, by pushing and forcing, or by broadening our view. We can move forward with subtle forcing or with subtle gentleness, or maybe stubborn gentleness is what's called for. Because I don't think we save the world by forcing, but by simplifying, by becoming simpler and clearer about what we really need. So I'll return to the call for a Sabbath. We who have lost our sense and our senses, our touch, our smell, our vision of who we are, we who frantically force and press all things without rest for body or spirit, hurting our earth, injuring ourselves, we call a halt. That is the question I invite into this space this morning. What does your Sabbath look like? What does your Sabbath look like? Thank you, friends.